Boo, welcome to the Way of Champions, man. So happy to have you on.
Thanks, John. It's a real pleasure. I'm grateful for the opportunity to have what will undoubtedly be a fun conversation.
Well, you're our second ever fighter pilot on the podcast. First Royal Australian Air Force fighter pilot. Youngest ever too. What was that like being the youngest guy ever? Did you get a little slack for it or what?
I don't think it's even registered until it's all over. I think being the youngest is great because probably means you're the most ignorant as well. So you just do what you're told, follow a little bit like a greyhound following the rabbit. You just run hard, keep your eye on the prize, and you know, 4 years later, you pop out the other end and you're a qualified fighter pilot. So, yeah, it was a journey. But yeah, I think an element of ignorance is bliss because it was very difficult. And some of the older folks that already had life experience and maybe didn't really appreciate living in a box and studying 18 hours a day and marching to work. So, there's actually a philosophy I've taken throughout life. It's like, don't overthink, just be ignorant, don't read too much into things, just play the ball. Whatever you see in front of you is what it is until it isn't.
Yeah,
So it was fun, man. It was a great job, great career, wonderful way to spend your 20s and
yeah.
late teens, because I actually joined when I was just turned 19. So yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Well, it was interesting. Yeah, the last guy we had on, Ryan Bernacki was his name, and Ryan, was a squadron commander in the U.S. Air Force, but then he was also the commander for the Blue Angels. And what he talked about was when he became the commander of the Blue Angels, even though he was the boss, he was the most ignorant guy. Like everyone else has been flying it. So as the leader, he had to completely trust his people to sort of get them used, teach them how to do what they were doing. And he's like, and it's not how we typically think of leadership, but it really is, right? And so he's like, sort of kind of what you said. I was the most ignorant guy in the room. And if I didn't use that as a learning tool, right? If my ego got in the way, bad things would have happened.
Yeah, it's what's really great about the fighter pilot community. I mean, it's the only job in the military where the officers and the leaders are also the execution side of the business. So it's not like you're a major and you're in command of 200 troops in a company or a platoon as a lieutenant. You are, even as the leader of the entire Blue Angels, which is a massive responsibility because it's not just the 6 airplanes flying; it's the 200 men and women that support it and travel all over the world. We build an environment that is robust enough to allow this high turnover because the Blue Angels is exactly like any other squadron
Yeah.
in that a third of it turns over every 12 months. So by the time you run a 2.5 to 3 year cycle, every single person is new.
Yeah.
But the system is robust enough to deliver a performance standard consistently. And that, if you really look at, hey, what can we take from the world of fighter pilots and apply in life? That's what it is. It's really creating simple systems that you can plug anyone into, where the focus is on building trust every day, which means in our world, you never show up knowing everything. It's impossible. There's no such thing as the 100% fighter pilot. Even guys that have been flying for 30 years, you've got to be curious. You've got to be humble, because if you're not, the jet humbles you, and if you're not careful, it humbles you in a way that's permanent, and that's it for you. So yeah, it's a great world. The challenge with it is people just see it as a fighter pilot thing, and it doesn't work in my world. And we've seen that with Afterburner, the company that I own, working in the NFL, working in some of the biggest companies on the planet, working in hospitals with surgeons. You don't see that. It's always a barrier. It's like, oh, we got this covered. We know what we're doing. We don't need any help. And that's the fundamental issue here. It's just you'll never be on top of it. You'll never know everything. And the more you move towards egocentric hierarchical leadership, the more you open yourself up to your blind spots letting you down.
Yeah.
And so yeah, every fighter pilot that comes you ever speak to, we will all have that exactly the same story. And that every 2 years you're plunked into a job or a role you've got no idea. and you have to spin up really quickly to be a competent leader within that environment, which means, and this is kind of what people, I guess, forget about leadership, is it's hard. Like
Yeah.
you've got a lot to do, and
Yeah.
you've got to be the one that sets the standard and learns the fastest, and uh, be the example that everyone mimics to make sure that you build a culture that values doing a great job.
Yeah. And I think also just the first time you fly, they don't throw you in the jet, right? You go to a simulator and then a slower plane and then a faster plane and a faster plane. And so the decisions that are coming at you are increasingly faster, but you're getting reps slower and slower and slower. So it's like you don't go from um, you know, 0 to Mach speed on day one. You work your way up to it, which I think is a really important aspect of leadership and things as well. It's like there's a process and there's a journey in your learning, and that's okay. And you can't skip those steps. We have a world where everyone wants to skip to just be the CEO or skip to be the head coach in my world. And it's like, don't miss your reps.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was just reading an article on this subject last week, and the article's talking about how in a digital environment and the way that we consume and we're always on is that we're losing the ability to comprehend time, like how long things take. And as we are when we order on Uber Eats, we just want our food here now. This instant gratification and instant delivery expectation is filtering into life, and unfortunately, life doesn't work that way. It's slow, it's messy, it's uncomfortable, and the more you try and force it, the harder it is, and the more I call it the perfection death spiral. There was a study last year that highlighted 86% of leaders suffer from undiagnosed perfectionism, and
Mm,
when we talk about perfectionism, what we're really saying is setting an expectation that's unrealistic, and then a time frame that on top of that that's also unrealistic, and the spiral goes from perfection to control, and you feel like if I just control more and I do more myself, the easier I'm going to get to that target. And then as you exert more control, you become overwhelmed. And when you become overwhelmed, then you feel perfection slipping away even more. So you exert more control and more overwhelm. And if you're not careful, that spiral just ends up as burnout. And this is the challenge with people that operate in a high performance environment in athletics, in business, in life. It's you gotta trust the process. You gotta understand that each Wednesday is different. You're gonna feel different. You're gonna have more energy or less energy. You got to learn to ride the wave and bring awareness to the fact that it ain't always going to be how you want it to be. And that's fighter pilots mine that's like a bit of a gold mine,
hmm
because we understand that most of the time we fly the same sort of missions, right? It's like basketball or football. You've got a set number of plays, you practice them, you go on exercise, you demonstrate them. But every time you practice, you're having a good day and a bad day. And the bad days are really important because that's the learning days.
hmm
As Nelson Mandela said, I don't win or lose, I win or learn.
hmm
And what tends to happen though in the instant expectation world is we bring in frustration, and as we start to bring emotion into the equation, we remove the neural energy away from the learning centers, away from the cognition and learning, and we put it down into the amygdala and down into the impulsive.
hmm
So we end up just being annoyed. I mean, you see it when you watch a game of basketball, and Josh Giddey, good Aussie, gets there and he'll miss a couple of threes. Boom, that's it. You're in the frustration phase. You're overthinking. You're in the perfection to control to overwhelm, and you spiral down until you have that moment, which is the lucky shot that resets you and resets the neural pathways again. So mostly in life, in sport, in business, we leave that spark to chance, that ability to turn things around. Whereas a fighter pilot does that with intention, and we say, "Oh, that wasn't what I was expecting.
hmm
Why did that just happen?
hmm
And what can I immediately do to right the ship?" And that is what you call iterative cognitive models,
hmm
where every action for most people has an uncontrolled impact.
Yeah.
Whereas as a fighter pilot, it's like, "Oh, there's an action, here's a stimulus, stop and think about it, and then take the right action next time. That stop and think is absolutely crucial. That's why I mean it's why you have a timeout, right?
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. But it's a response, not a reaction, right? It's a response is
exactly.
your training, your character, your reps, all that is that breath and respond. And we can look in sports. This is a bad call by an official. This is a bad goal against, a bad mistake, whatever it is. We have a choice in that moment to react, yell, scream, lose our heads, or respond, you know, take a deep breath and get better, learn from it, whatever is required in that moment. And I think this is it. I want to ask you a quick question though about this perfectionism in leadership because it's such a high percentage. Do you see when someone is in that perfectionist spiral and they're grasping for more control and they're not trusting their people, is that also a moment where they tend to then surround themselves with, they say, A level leaders hire A level people and B level leaders hire C level people. And I see this all the time. Is that something that also causes them maybe to surround themselves, hire assistant coaches, hire board members that are, not quite as good because then they're threatened? So people threaten their control?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, perfectionism is a unconscious narrative, and the reason why this study called it undiagnosed perfectionism is people who think they're perfectionists, they kind of know it, right? But they're not probably perfectionists. They probably have OCD, which is different.
Mm.
Everything needs to be a certain way. So perfectionism is just a few unconscious biases that whisper to you, you're not good enough. It's your fault. Like it layers in identity with the failure rather than just looking at the failure as it is what it is. So when you see it in practice in business, yeah, that's why you end up with these disengaged teams, right? Like it's hard to engage in something that you can't control.
Mm.
It's like sitting in the passenger seat of a car. You're not engaged in the driving process. You're not engaged in the journey to where you're going. You're just the passenger.
Mm.
And when we start to see control from a leader, that they're effectively putting everyone in the passenger seat. I have this in my latest book. I call it the Avenger effect, where because we celebrate heroism as humanity, leaders tend to think that I have to save the day. I need to be the hero. I've got to put my cape and my red undies on and swoop in and fix things. What happens with that, though, is subconsciously leaders start to sabotage the team without even realizing it.
Mm.
They create vague objectives. They tell people what to do. They're so busy and so controlling that people are waiting for some information and the leader doesn't give it to them. So you end up with people who just get lost and they just wait. I call it the difference between being a gardener and a wheelbarrow. You want to tell people this is what the garden needs to look like. Go do it rather than say, right, go and put the gardenias over there. We need to lay some lawn over there. And it's a lack of awareness. Like most leaders don't even realize they're doing it. And what happens is you inherit the busyness of not being a leader,
Mm.
and you take that as you get promoted. And you got promoted because you were busy, not because you're a great leader. And therefore, as you get promoted, you keep thinking busy is good. It's why I think so many great coaches were average players.
Yeah.
It's almost like, well, and why great players tend to make really bad coaches.
Yeah.
And it's similar as fighter. Typically, really skilled fighter pilots
Yeah.
are not great leaders because they get frustrated and like, why can't you just fly? I mean, this is easy. Just put it here and put the
Yeah.
pipper
Yeah.
there, and it all happens. So because they're so invested in their own journey and they've got that little bit of talent. So when we look at perfectionist leaders, perfectionism as an individual is what drives a lot of people, but equally it's what makes them unhappy, right? So you can be a
Hmm.
world champion and still be miserable. So you got to break that loop, and the way that spiral, and the way you break the spiral is you bring in intentional reflection. You
Hmm.
bring this practice of identifying and being honest about, hey, this is what the outcome is. and this is where I'm at. And there's a gap there. Is the gap because the outcome's too ambitious, or is it because of what I'm doing? So I'm
Hmm.
going to have a conversation around that. I'm going to unpick it a little bit, and I'm going to invite other people into that conversation because I know personally, I'm biased in myself. I create my own limits. I create my own expectation. It's based on the stories I tell myself, which are just a whole bunch of stories.
Hmm.
And then what I'm going to do is commit to doing it a little bit differently tomorrow. It's what happened in 2011, 2012 with the New York Giants. We came in,
Hmm.
they weren't doing that great. And then we took the after game reviews and turned them into proper fighter pilot debriefs where we unlocked the thinking of the players. So rather than just be told by the coaches what to do and what you did wrong, we brought discovery into that conversation and say, well, you tell us what you were thinking and you tell us what you did wrong and you
Hmm.
tell us what you're going to do next time. That's a much better way of learning. It's a difference between reading a book and actually scribbling in the margins.
Yeah.
That engagement. So what I love about, or what I feel very grateful for as a fighter pilot, is it taught me to always be curious and challenge everything.
Hmm.
And don't challenge it in terms of pointing fingers. Challenge it in terms of looking internally, and then that gives you the power to invest in what you can control yourself to do
Yeah.
something.
Yeah. I mean, after each flight, after each game, what went well, what needs work, what's a good intention for this week in practice or whatever I'm doing, right? And those same three questions are applicable whether this was your best game or your worst game. Man, I crushed that training mission, or whew, that did not go well, right? Just like there's always something good, there's always something I can learn. And I think that's so absolutely critical. Let's talk about your work in American football, and you mentioned the Giants there, and American football is one of those sports that really is very much take 5 steps, turn around, the ball will be there or it won't. Like very little thinking asked for, yet the players we tend to evaluate the most are the ones who can solve the problem when the play breaks apart. Right? We call them the playmakers, the Lamar Jacksons these days or whatever, the Tom Brady's, the Eli Manning when you were with the Giants, right? Like who can solve a problem when it all falls apart. And this idea that as an athlete, if I'm now required to think, well, why are we doing this? And I get to give some input and get to have a discussion, I'm going to be far better prepared, not just for the moments it goes well, but for the moments it's not going well, right? To understand why it didn't go well and maybe come up with a solution on the spot instead of waiting for the after game review to be like, oh, yeah, I should have read that there.
Yeah, look, it's the thing about thinking is when you're in a game, you can't think. And there's a famous line in the Top Gun movie where Maverick says to one of the younger pilots, "If you think you're dead."
Hmm.
There's a nuance to that. It's if you have to think when you're in the thick of it, that's not the thinking time. The thinking time is before,
Yeah,
and the thinking time is after.
right.
It's very rare that you will see a professional sports team finish a game and then go and watch the tapes immediately. They go home and then they
Hmm.
watch it the next day. And
Hmm.
when you watch it the next day, it's all different. Your memory bias has changed the way in which you viewed your role in the game. And I've sat in hundreds of sporting reviews, and of the hundreds I've sat in, not a single coach has ever naturally said to a player, "What were you thinking there?"
Mm.
It's always watch the tape. Here's the mistake. What should you have done? What are you going to do next time?
Yeah.
And in the Giants as well. Look, we've worked with 19 NFL teams, right? And the great thing about this, it's not me. We've had multiple different fighter pilots within Afterburner go and work with these teams. And what you find is that the coaches, and it comes back to ego again. Remember, a coach is being paid to solve problems and coach, right?
Hmm.
So therefore, a coach's natural bias that they're not aware of is that I've got to be the expert. I mean,
Hmm.
that's they're not actively thinking that. They don't come in every day and say, I have to be the expert. But deep down in the narrative that is invisible, that's how they're justifying their paycheck.
Hmm.
Therefore, as a result, they are going to constantly step in and be the expert. Yeah, great coaches don't talk. They listen and ask questions.
Hmm.
And that's really difficult because when you start to not be the expert, you're starting to feel like, my identity is who am I? And when you
Hmm.
start saying, who am I? Then you're kind of, you're into some really, unproductive behaviors, which is,
Yeah, yeah,
John, can I just time for a second? I've just got to go turn the furnace off.
yeah.
It's really bugging me. You got that? Is that cool?
Yep.
Sorry, man. 1 second.
You know, Boo, we've had Steve Kerr on the podcast a couple times, and I remember it's got to be going back 10 years. There was this moment where in a long NBA season, one game, he allowed his players during practice to design inbounds plays.
Mm-hmm.
And then the play comes up in a game, and all of a sudden he hands the clipboard to Andre Iguodala or Draymond Green, and they design a play, and it works. And afterwards, the reporters were saying, "How disrespectful! How could you let your players do that?" And all I was thinking was, in what other industry would we say, hey, here are the best people in the world at this, and we're paying them $30 million a year, but they can't come up with an inbounds play? like come on, man. And so I think about sometimes this ego of coaching and of like, I'm the coach, you're the player, I talk, you listen, but that doesn't fit with the modern young athlete. And it doesn't really fit with what's going to allow your people to perform their best, does it?
No, and there's two sides to the equation. I mean, as a fighter pilot and with Afterburner, we use this methodology that kind of works for anything. It's called plan, brief, execute, debrief. And if you think about planning, what we're really saying in planning is it's not the coach's job to go and plan and then tell. Planning is actually co-creation.
Hmm.
If you look at Ben Johnson and the Bears this year, how many of their plays in the clutch of the game were actually engineered by Caleb Williams and the receivers?
Hmm.
Like when you, in the post game interview, like, yeah, that's something that we came up with during training, and it worked because they created it. And that creating something and then delivering on it is a completely different neural structure from just doing what you're told. It's why autocratic nations tend to not be as successful as liberal nations because we allow people to
Hmm.
create. And I work with an organization that every leader was a PhD
Hmm.
scientist, incredibly intelligent, but they just couldn't get anything done because they're in their own head all the time. There was no co-creation. Co-creation creates collective understanding and collective consciousness. Yeah, you've got to do this is separate from the reps, right? This is separate from the 10,000 hours. Like you've got to, that's all the muscle memory. That's the stuff you need. So in the moment, you're not thinking about, oh, I need to, flip my wrist and my elbow needs to
Yeah.
be, in my golf swing, I need to make sure that I do these 10 things on the way through. It never works.
Yeah.
Uh, so it's what I think fighter pilots figured out 60 years ago is it's a delicate balance between all these things. Yes, some things have to be directive and repetitive, but some things need to be free and flexible, and you'll work that out over time uh, if you are open to practicing a lot of things. It's like the teams that they're really good at defense, and defense wins Super Bowls, defense wins championships. Well, it does, but not if you can't throw a ball. I mean, and some teams go down that route, and they're very rigid because defense is kind of rigid, right?
Hmm.
So you've got to constantly find this delicate balance between all of the 1,000 things that contribute to winning a Super Bowl or winning an NBA championship. I mean, if you look at all of these competitions, the reality is the majority of teams are losing because there's only one winner.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, so it's I find it fascinating with human performance how we frame it up, but at the same time we forget the really important bit, which is winning. And winning is not a game; it's a play, it's a
Hmm.
moment. It's micro winning consistently delivers the macro win at the end.
Yeah.
And then it's that balance between the emotion. I was working with a professional sports team in Australia, and they do the pre-game brief, everyone would know what the three, and we trained them to just focus on three things per game.
Hmm.
And then the minute that the brief was over, everyone would be yelling out, and don't forget this, and don't forget that, and don't forget that. And it's like you've just gone from completely focused players in a quiet room to yelling and screaming 20 things we've got to focus on. And the poor younger players are like, oh, what do I do? What do I do? And then they, fumble the ball in the third play.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, yeah. You know,
you
it's
know,
funny because I think we also have to be careful of having an outcome bias of like, oh, well, we won, so everything was right, or we lost, so it was wrong, right? Because we could do everything right and the play works perfectly, and the wide open player in the end zone drops the ball, right? And doesn't mean anything that was wrong. It was just we didn't technically execute the final action of the play. And I think this is the thing that this goes back to your debrief of like, well, what went well? Because we can play our best game and lose. We could play terribly and win. But over time, we need to do a lot of things right. And I think your point there at the end about focusing on what are the most important things, what are the biggest rocks in the jar, just keep our focus on them. These three things that's going to affect 90% of the result today versus the other 11 that are, 1% each, right? And I think that's the challenge. This is the challenge for coaches. I don't know if you ever work with them at like halftime talks or timeouts or whatever. Like, what are you going to say in that? You can't say seven things. What's your one thing you're going
yeah.
to get across?
And that's where the coaches have got to be careful of saying, this is what I'm observing. It's got to be the other way. Say, hey guys, what are you feeling? What are you observing out there? What's happening?
Yeah.
Because when you're, it's called perspective, right? So when you're looking at something from above, it's a very different perspective from alongside, and a very different perspective from inside. And it's again, it's fascinating when one of the initiatives we brought with the professional team, this same team in Australia, was we said, let's put cameras on the helmets of the players. And then when we do our tape reviews, let's use those cameras rather than the cameras that are looking down.
Yeah.
Because what you're looking down at, no one is actually seeing. Like no one can see that in the game. So you're coaching from a perspective that is not the perspective of the players.
Right.
And that is a very important nuance. For a fighter pilot, everything is debriefed from the perspective of the fighter pilot.
Yeah.
It's your heads-up display. It's through your helmet. Yeah, we layer over the bigger picture, but it's always like, this is what's going on around you. This is what you're seeing. Why is there a gap between what you're seeing and processing compared to reality?
Yeah.
Next time, remember to look here. Next time, remember to ask this question.
Yeah.
So even that is and if coaches aren't asking players, what did you see in that moment? It's basically, it's not wasting time.
Yeah.
But it's also teaching false lessons. And that's where you just got to be asking questions. Ask questions. What were you seeing? What were you thinking? And we call that situational awareness.
Yeah.
And if you're only coming at a particular conversation, it could be business. If you're only coming at the conversation from the perspective of the leader and you're working with 10 people, you've got the wrong perspective, man. Like you've got awareness of this, not awareness of the entire situation.
Yeah.
If you look at a quarterback and you look at, they have to make decisions very quickly, right? Like we call this leading now, leading in the moment, the response versus the react. And if any player is out of position, that immediately ruins the situational awareness of the quarterback, which means they're going to make a they're not going to, but on the balance of probability, they're going to make a poorer decision. Same in leadership in business. If one player isn't playing their role, or they're out of position, or they're not following the sales script like everyone else, and you assume that they are, then all of a sudden you're going to end up with this performance imbalance, and you're not going to understand why, because all you're doing is looking at the numbers from here. You're not looking at the execution from here.
Yeah. I had a coaching mentor tell me once the sort of the best way to talk to players is start your sentence with, I'm curious. I'm
Yeah.
curious why you played that pass there. I'm curious what you saw in that moment. Because you said, we might be looking at film from above, but even in the middle of a practice repetition, I'm often standing on the sideline looking at the play east-west while the quarterback or the defender in soccer is looking north-south. So I'm seeing the fields from a very different angle. So if I, stop the play and start screaming at Boo and like, Boo, I told you we want to play the ball into the striker's feet there. Why didn't you do that? Um, I'm just yelling at you. I'm not gaining any insight into what you know. Where if I say, Boo, I'm curious what you saw on that play, and then you say to me, I know we're trying to hit the ball into the striker's feet, but so and so was in the way, so I chose this instead. Man, that's a very different. Now I know what you learn. You looked for the right thing. It wasn't on. You made a different choice. Now I can coach you. But if
Yeah.
I have no insight into what you have actually seen and understand, I can't coach you. And too many coaches, like you said, it's just my perspective, my idea. Why aren't you doing what I told you to do? And you have no idea if the players have learned something or not.
100%. And that's the key. It's like if it's a play and you didn't run the play, then a coach can call that out. But at the
Yeah.
same time, they have to ask why didn't you run the play? And, unfortunately, the answer to that is I didn't do enough homework.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
which is always. But I'm also fascinated with professional athletes. Like some coaches want to avoid that conversation. They don't want to. Oh, we don't want to put Johnny on the spot here. So let's use nice words, and it's in a fighter pilot phrase that's not allowed. Like it's called nameless and rankless, and what's right, not who's right. So
Yeah.
you should never have to worry about the words that you use in a debrief. You just focus on the facts.
Yeah.
So and my goodness, in professional sports, there's so many facts. I mean, there's a statistic for everything.
Yeah.
But you watch a game, the commentators there, Brady's, commentating the game, and he's like, "Oh, look at that big gap. Why did the quarterback throw over there?"
Mm.
And it's like, "Oh, the quarterback should have seen that gap." And that's like the story from there. But if you think about it, and we saw this in the tape debriefs, which is, oh, okay, let's just use Caleb, right? Next time, on this play, throw over there. But what no one thinks about is let's draw a line backwards and let's see what he was seeing. Oh, look, there's a 30-pound monster with an
Yeah.
arm up in the air. Can't even see the gap because there's a
Yeah.
human in the way, which now becomes an offensive linesman debrief, not a Caleb debrief, because
Yeah.
now we're getting down to the detail of the play.
Yeah.
Um, so it's just so easy, and that's why coaching is so hard, is because you can sit there and debrief 30 plays, but really the value is going deep on six.
Mhm.
Because the deeper you go to the individual layer, the more it's going to resonate because it makes sense to them because it's through their eyes.
Yeah.
So that's I think it's very powerful when we as leaders have that skill set to how do we have a conversation. You said it, just I'm curious as to why, I'm curious as to what that allows you to get behind the eyeballs of the person across from you.
Yeah, and then the ownership piece of it as well, as the leader, as the head coach, as the position coach, right? This idea of ownership. If I want my athletes or my pilots or whatever to take ownership of maybe making a mistake in this play, I have to own my part of it too, right?
Yeah.
And I think this is such a huge thing. I can't just be the detective of mistakes, and I can't just be the blamer. I have to go, well, I didn't prepare you well enough for this. What's your part in this, right? And then if everyone takes ownership, we're going to get better. But if I just blame, then the blame cascades down, right? And
Yeah.
I always like this idea of leadership of, you got to own it all, right? Jocko Willink, extreme ownership. Like I got to own this, and then everyone else is going to own their piece too.
No, absolutely right. And it's okay for something to happen that's outside your control and what people would call an excuse. But the next question is, and then what? Like, and then what did we do? Because
Hmm.
that thing we can't control might happen again one day.
Hmm.
So it's a powerful this fighter pilot culture of reflection is incredibly powerful. And in
Hmm.
30 years of doing this with Afterburner and the team, we've never worked with an organization that does it. They do a form of it, a version of it.
Yeah.
They do the intention of reflection and review, but the real like anchoring every conversation with what was the expectation, what was reality, why is there a gap between the two, and how do we close that gap in the next 24 hours? That's powerful. To the point where this team in Australia, they actually installed a massive jumbotron screen on the field so they could do it in real time. That's how much they understood that the learning the closer to the moment of it occurring, the better the learning experience. So they'd run a play, run it on the jumbotron, talk through it as a team, what they were seeing, run it again. And then when they ran it again, it was, we got them out of the habit of today we've got to run 20 plays. If it's just one play that we get right, that's more valuable than running through 20 plays that are okay.
That are okay. Yeah, God, I love that. It's so good. I wanted to hit on something you were talking about in terms of feedback. And we society have been misled for years of I talked to really interesting guest a couple years ago, Ashley Merriman, and she talked about feedback and how, we were told, oh, the sandwich, we got to give them a positive and then a critique and then a positive. And she's like, so she did the research. She's like, well, where's the science behind that? And there is none, right? And she's like, what she actually found was that was a technique that started in HR departments to make the person giving the feedback feel better about themselves.
Yeah.
But that depending on the level of expertise and the intentions of the person getting the feedback, the higher their level, whether, if I'm a Olympic athlete, a professional athlete, I'm a fighter pilot, I'm a CEO, right? So the more I have invested, the more direct the feedback needs to be. Don't beat around the bush. Give me that. Now, it doesn't mean that I don't take into account your state of mind, your emotional state in that moment, right? You just fumbled the ball on the 1 yard line and we lost the game. I don't have to give it, I can be empathetic because you already feel like crap. But at the same time, beating around the bush of the critical feedback that's going to make you better doesn't really work for high performers, does it?
It doesn't work for anyone. There's
Yeah.
another study that identified that almost 70% of people prefer negative feedback if it's constructive over false praise.
Yeah.
Like they just want to know. But I challenge the idea of feedback. The problem with learning is there's a lot of back. There's a lot of in the past.
Mm-hmm.
And 2-3 seconds after the past, your brain's automatically already reprogramming it.
Mm-hmm.
It's layering over your ego. So the challenge with feedback is it's not taking you forward.
Mm.
And if it's the wrong kind of feedback, it's terrible, right? Like if it gets into the emotional side of criticism, then you're going to have a negative response. The missing link when we talk about feedback is it has to be action oriented. It has to provide something to do tomorrow, and it also needs to be connected to the win tomorrow. So when I just don't even like feedback. I don't like review.
Is it input? Like, what would you call it?
I would call it curiosity driving action.
Mm.
See, it's because again, when you're giving feedback, you're giving it from your perspective. You're not giving it from the person's. And when someone, hey, you're not hitting your sales target this week. I listened to one of your sales calls. You're not doing the sales script right. So do the sales script right. And that person's like, in their mind, they're like, oh, I thought I was doing it right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'll do it better tomorrow. And then they come up with their idea of what better tomorrow looks like, and they're still not doing well, rather than have the conversation, which is, hey, what's your sales target by Friday? Oh, it's this. Where are you at the moment? It's this. Oh, okay. What can we do together to help you get lifted up here? Just run me through the process.
Mm-hmm.
Run through the process, and you go, okay, cool. Okay, because you're a leader, right? So you've already done their job, and you're now in charge of them. So your job is not to tell them; it's to coach them.
Mm-hmm.
So you'll say to them, okay, cool. Just run me through the sales script. I'm not gonna listen to a call. I want you to run through it. Oh, let's just stop there. Yeah.
Hmm.
You know, I noticed that you were just telling them about our product, but we didn't really discover if they needed it yet. Because when you look at a sales script, there's no nuance in it. It's a bunch of words. It's like when you look at a play for a in any type of sport, there's no context to it. It's just a bunch of circles and X's. It doesn't matter whether it's soccer or lacrosse or football. The context comes from the players because they're the ones that bring the diagram to life.
Yeah.
So it's not till we run it and then we reflect on it that we understand what that looks like through the eyes of the players, not the eye of the coach.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then instead of saying do this next time, it's like, so what do you think? What do you think would be good to do next time?
Yeah.
And it's only when they say stuff that you're starting to identify the gaps in their knowledge. And it's like, okay, this is a training gap. Oh, this is a homework gap. Oh, this is a physical gap. Like, oh, this is where we need to work on physically. And then you can get onto these micro actions. So if you think about it, the teams that win at the end of a championship series do the most amount of good actions and the least amount of bad actions, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't matter how thoughtful you are. It doesn't matter how amazing the plays are. If they're not executed, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
So therefore, to win, you have to go from the start of a season to the end of the season to do the most amount of correct actions to win and the least amount of bad ones.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what debriefing does, because every player every day takes 2 or 3 actions that they apply the next day. They don't have to be the right ones because we'll debrief tomorrow and we'll learn from that. And oh, by the way, you don't have to just learn from your experience. You can learn from watching other people. You can learn from asking questions, and so there's the way that a fighter pilot debriefs is I debrief myself first, right? So this is again, most sports teams, the players just get into the post game review, right? They don't even look at their own tapes. So the first thing you do is you look at your tape and then you shut your eyes and you run it through what that looks like to you, not from the play, right? Because the way the human brain processes information is you watch a play, there's a player, he's at your left 10 o'clock, 3 yards. So as you watch it, you automatically think you knew that at the time. You're just going to think that because it's there, it's real, so I must have seen it. There's no way I couldn't have not seen it. So your memory's already telling you tricks, which is why the players need to shut their eyes and run through it in real time again and say, did I actually see that? Okay, let's run through a scenario where I didn't see it. And then they visualize that. And that helps them then cue the next time that blind spot, right? So it's when you make a mistake, it's because of something you're unaware of. And that's why players like Tom, realistically, Belichick and Brady, it was Brady because Brady was the one in the game.
Yeah.
Brady was the one that saw it from his perspective. Brady was the one that was able to explain it through his eyes. And if you look at the evidence, Belichick post Brady, it's there to see, right? Peter Jackson, Michael Jordan, far more symbiotic relationship.
Yeah, Phil Jackson. Yeah.
Yeah, and you look at how they filled each other in. Jackson gave Jordan the leeway to call people out in the play, and then Jordan. So they kind of swapped. They had the big picture view and the in the game view. Look,
I want to tell you, like we had Phil Jackson on the podcast, and he talked about when he took over, and they were putting in this offense they called the triangle offense, and it was really an offense that just people moved in a certain way that someone was going to be open. And he sat down with Michael Jordan, who's this leading scorer, and he pointed out to him, he said, no team with the leading scorer in the NBA has won a championship in 20 years or whatever it is. Would you willing to be score? And so Michael Jordan's like, what? So what? I'm not going to get shots anymore. And sort of the way they co-created this, which was really interesting, is that look, we're going to run. It's a 24-second shot clock. We're going to run this offense, and with 8 seconds left on the shot clock, if something still hasn't created, the offense is get the ball to Michael. Right? So you're going to always know that if it all breaks down, the last thing is get you the ball and you're going to get your shot there to create a shot at the end. But in the meantime, let's create stuff for other people. Give the Steve Kerrs of the world the open shot. Give these other guys, the Scottie Pippen, these chances, and lo and behold, you win all these championships, right? And I think this is the co-creation. He couldn't say, "Hey, Michael, suck it up. You're not going to score anymore." He said, "Look, we're going to do this, but when it breaks down, we're going to get you the ball to fix the play."
But you just think of how much easier it is to make there's only two things you got to worry about: running a triangle play and giving it 8 seconds.
Yeah,
You
exactly.
think of other teams, the amount of stuff they're thinking about,
Yeah,
and the number of different plays they have, and the poor old, the play with the balls, like, oh, which one of the 10 scenarios do I want to? And
yeah,
that is the key to success, is keep things as simple as possible, because
yeah,
this you might think that, oh, keeping it simple, we're not going to have enough trick plays, we're not going to get inside the loop of the other team.
yeah,
But you will, because your decision making is going to be that much better
yeah,
and faster. That's what gets you ahead. It's not uncertainty, it's
yeah,
decisive.
yeah, yeah,
Decisiveness is the goal here,
yeah.
particularly for playmakers, because as Michael's watching the shot clock, and I could almost guarantee you, as it's getting to 10-9, he's getting himself positioned. Like, he knows it's coming,
He's
right?
going to get the ball. Yeah,
Yeah, and he's ready for it.
yeah.
So yeah, I love Peter. I think he's a
Yeah, I mean, Phil
great.
also told us this other story. He was like, during the regular season, at the end, the other team's going on a run. Most coaches would call a timeout, and he wouldn't. And he's like, I was preparing my team for that moment in the playoffs when we were out of timeouts and they were going to have to solve it themselves, right? I wasn't waiting to that moment going, "Oh God, we're out of timeouts, so you guys figure it out." Like they'd done that all season long. Like, okay, he's not going to bail us out with a timeout here. We got to figure out how to bail ourselves out in this moment. And I just think that's all. It's incredible. I want to ask you about your NFL teams because you mentioned 17 teams. Two of them won a Super Bowl. And the connection between those two was the Manning brothers. And you also told me last time we talked, like it, only two of the teams really sort of bought all the way into what you were doing, said we're going to go from the beginning to the end, and we've totally bought in, and both won a Super Bowl. And others sort of dabble, but then when the push comes to shove, they pull out. So maybe talk about those two, the Manning brothers, why they bought in, that connection. I thought it was really cool.
Yeah, I mean, why they bought in, I think, is because of the winning.
Yeah,
So I think it had a quick effect, but also let's not take anything away from the head coaches,
yeah,
because part of our program was kicking all the coaches out of the room
yeah, yeah,
and letting the players review by themselves.
yeah,
That is incredibly in service leadership, right? Uh, Whereas, to go back earlier in the podcast, this subconscious drive of a coach to be the expert, and without that, I don't have a job and I don't have an identity.
mm,
I've seen this often in companies that we coach, in that the leaders are like, "Boo, I'm not going to have a job because I'm not doing anything." And it's like, no, no, no. Now you're leading. That's the point. You're not meant to be doing. You're
yeah,
meant to be. You're meant to be the wisdom on the mountain that just comes out of nowhere with the thunderbolt, because you've got the big picture and you're out of the weeds.
yeah.
You look at busy coaches and you're like, man, you can't be taking anything in while you're that busy.
So the
Like,
Giants,
you're
that's Tom Coughlin, right? He was the coach.
correct.
Yeah. So talk about him because the outside impression of Tom Coughlin is hard man, discipline, gruff, whatever. But yet you said his ego allowed him to step back and be like, all right, you got it.
Yeah, and I don't think that was a conversation, which is like, "Hey, Tom, we got to put your ego in a box." I don't think that was. I don't think that was it. I mean, he read the book Flawless Execution. He digested it. He thought, this is a good idea, and there's this idea of there's committed and uncommitted. There's nothing in between. There's no such thing as I'm 99% committed to something, because to go to your timeout, it gives you 1% leeway, right?
Yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah.
like a rock climber that climbs without a rope. Like, you're
Yeah.
100% committed.
It's all in.
You're all in, right? And I just think in that that was the first nut that cracked, was the Giants, right? And it all came on the back of that.
Yeah.
Uh, so there's two things that are really important when you're doing something new. One, it makes sense, and two, it works.
Yeah.
And that's the bit that a lot of leaders forget about. It's like, the big ideas don't win. It's the big ideas executed that win.
Hmm.
And I think because with the Giants, we had a couple of early wins, and look, they were only a little bit they were only a little bit in initially. They really loved it. Then they tried to do it themselves, and then there was like a push and shove, like a physical altercation between the offense and defense, and they asked us to come back in.
Hmm.
And because we moderated, because what happens with a lot of organizations when they debrief is they forget the bit which is it's what's right, not who's right. It's not
Yeah.
opinion. And so much of one of the phrases that has us rolling our eyes a little bit is when a football team says, "Oh, it's just football. It just happens. I just throw a pick." And it's like, no, it doesn't just happen. It happens for a reason. Oh, it's just business. It's just what happens in our business. And it's like, no, it's not. It's happening because you're doing something to cause it, or you're not doing something to cause it. Like stuff doesn't happen by accident. Like if you crash your car into a tree, yeah, clearly you didn't set out to do that, but you did something. You as the driver did something to put that tree in there. You were driving too fast on a wet road. I remember I had a car accident. I was living in England, and my normal car was in for a service, and I had like a nice M series BMW, and then they gave me this little beep beep pokey little Fiat thing. And as I was driving to work, as I did every morning to go flying in the middle of winter, I hit some black ice in this little roller skate of a car and flipped airborne, but I got caught in a hedge and I landed back on the wheels. And the immediate response for me was debriefing it straight away. Like, not in my normal car. I'm in a roller skate. I'm driving too fast. It was a given. And I'm lucky. Whereas I think a lot of people automatically flip into, oh, it wasn't me. It was the ice. It was the road. It was, I initially had that reaction, but then I realized, I guess after a while as a fighter pilot, you don't even think, you just automatically go into what was my role in that.
Right.
And I think in a lot of sporting environments and a lot of high performing businesses, it's just easier to blame someone else than take it yourself because that's safer. Like, I'm not going to get fired if I just keep blaming everything except me. But if I say it's me, instantly and that's why you've got to do this as a cultural practice. That's why every player in the New York Giants had to do it. Every player in the Broncos had to do it. But the other teams where we just came in and did a 45-minute keynote and left, they're just seeing fighter pilot razzle dazzle. They're not sitting there thinking, oh, so Coach Coughlin was the only coach that read the whole book, so he had a working knowledge of it. Same with Moneyball. I mean, if you look at the Moneyball approach, it was one coach, Billy Bean, who really invested in the methodology and took the risk. He had to come at it without ego and also wear the pain of the losses until it worked. And that's hard. It's easier to be mediocre and keep going and make excuses than it is to go through the painful process of growth. And that's leadership. It's like, hey, leader, choose your discomfort. You've got the discomfort of losing or the discomfort of growth.
Yeah.
Either way, it's uncomfortable. So invest in growth.
Well, then, so Eli Manning tells his brother Peyton, who's with the Broncos, and it's the end of Peyton's career and, trying to win another Super Bowl. So it's the leader, the coach, but it's also the leader as the players, right? So his buy-in matters a lot as well, right? So
his was huge. And again, I didn't work with him. I was in Australia. I was starting my own business. I was living in the Middle East, but the team that worked with him are still in the team at Afterburner.
yeah.
And the way I wish we could say we had all this awareness of this inner narrative. I mean, we're dealing with NFL players and coaches. No one's telling us what they're feeling, right? So we're making some assumptions along the way that there's these penny drop moments. None of them said, "Oh, I really thought about this," and I stepped back and I embrace this different leadership. No, that's not what they're doing. They're hardcore. But what's happening is they're being convinced by the storytelling and that it's working actually on game day.
Yeah.
And, I had this team I was working with in Australia in our equivalent of the NFL, NRL.
Yeah.
And this team was performing very badly. And the coach I'd just written On Time, On Target, and he read the book and he called me in. And we did the same thing we did with the Giants, with this team. And we said, look, just leave the room, all the coaches out of the room, let me run the debrief with the players. And what had happened was, this particular team, they're always on the back foot. And they had this play, like when you're on the back foot, we're going to do the spike play. And when we hear spike, 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 we're going to run the play.
Mhm.
And I just said, cool. So run me through what happens there. And it's like crickets. And I'm like, so Josh, what do you do? Sammy, what do you do? And none of them actually knew the play properly.
Mm.
So we got that with the coach. They trained to it and they won the next 6 games on the trot. Boom, 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 boom.
Mhm.
And that, because of the coach's style and, oh, you should have, you ran spike wrong. No one actually said, everyone was saying you're doing it wrong. No one actually said, what does right look like?
Yeah.
And the players were scared and the players didn't want to look like idiots.
Right.
And every player had a slight, because this coach was quite like, he'd debrief a part of it and another part of it, not the whole part. So they're all taking little sound bites, but the whole thing wasn't working together.
Yeah.
So that, and in business, around 80% of the failures, although we didn't win, are related to the understanding of the plan and the simplicity of the plan. Like
Yeah.
you would be surprised at just some really tight, simple planning and some debriefing against it, how much that can increase performance.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a soccer guy. I'm a Manchester United fan. It's been a lot of years of suffering here. But now on a good run of the team as we're recording this here. And they had a coach for the last 18 months and whatever, and he was all, the system and the tactics and the players, and he's buying players and he's spending 80 million euros on a player, and then 6 months later that player is still not starting because he's like, well, he hasn't learned the system yet. I'm like, is the problem with the player or is the problem with the system that
Yeah,
can't be figured out, that you're the only one who knows what it's supposed to look like, right? And then they fire this guy, bring in a former player, Michael Carrick, who sort of changes the simple tactic of it, but just simplifies it all, right? And now in the last 9 games or 10 games, they've won seven, drawn two, and lost one, right? And moved way up the table. And these players that they're like, we have to get rid of them, they're no good, all of a sudden are playing fantastic because their lives have been simplified. And so, yeah, my big shift in coaching went from like thinking that the coach is the one who had to dump more and more information in, is like, what can I strip away so that the players can just play and not overthink? So I see you nodding your head.
yeah, it's so true. And it's, even if you look at a trillion-dollar, multi-trillion-dollar company like Apple, I mean, even they have the discipline of keeping it tight. They have a phone, they have a tablet, they have a laptop, right?
Yeah.
There's various thematics within those,
Yeah.
but realistically, that's kind of what you're getting, and then they just make it easy to use.
Hmm.
Uh, you know, and I mean, I was a passive, I guess, passively engaged in American football
Yeah.
as an Australian, and I watched it. And but as a fighter pilot, I still look at the game today and I say, what, 75, 78 plays? I mean, that's a lot to remember.
Yeah.
Like that's a lot for any human being
Yeah.
to take in and use. And how do you train? Like, as a fighter pilot, we have the same philosophy. There's an offense and a defense. There can be 4 players on a field, or there could be 48.
Yeah.
Like, you don't know. And every play has to be as simple as possible, because I've got to know that that airplane at this time is going to be turning around and doing this, and then I have to do that. And if this happens over there, then every time when you're at high altitude, if you're a quarterback, you can throw the ball like 20 football fields.
Yeah.
If you're at low altitude, you can only throw it, 40 yards, 50 yards at best. We have that as well, because we have missiles that we throw and they work differently at different heights and different speeds. So it's insanely complex. Like, it's
Yeah.
insane, like
Yeah.
how difficult it is to maintain awareness and make good decisions. And that's why when we come back into the real world, we're like, just, you guys got to understand that it might look as though you've got all these options and you're going to trick people. But if someone's thinking of the play, they're distracted. Their natural motor skills are degraded. Like,
Hmm.
if a receiver's trying to remember left or right, my fingernails are holding in on this play here because it's a new one, they're going to statistically drop the ball,
Yeah.
because their motor skills don't have the freedom to operate automatically. You've hijacked that system.
Hmm.
It's called the salient switch in the brain. So the brain switches between two modes: task positive network and default mode network. So if you're a player and you've got to be like fully engaged in the motor skills and you flick that switch back into the thinking mode,
Hmm.
both are degraded. Neither's working.
Yeah.
Uh, so we say as fighter pilots, make the complex simple and the simple compelling.
Yeah.
And if you can just run one play fast with like a probability of 99%, that's what's going to help you win. The timing of it is where you have the advantage because the other team doesn't know when you're going to do it, right? I mean, look, it's like the tush push, right? I mean, the Eagles, they just nailed that play.
Right. You know what they're going to do.
Yeah,
Now try to
but they're
stop it.
so good at it. There's nothing you can do. And then every now and again they don't do it, and they've got inside your head.
Yeah.
But and that's the power of excellence. Like if
Hmm.
you're just excellent at one thing, it's very intimidating. It's if you're in a meeting and the rocket motor expert comes into the room in NASA, everyone's like, well, that dude is excellent and knows everything. And that makes that person's job easier because they're so excellent they don't have to think about making excuses. They don't have to think about explaining it 10 different ways. So
Yeah.
so excellence in itself is being really good at the basics, at the small things.
Yeah. Tell people as we're done here, just the newest book, and then also how they can connect with your work and get in touch.
Yeah, so Flawless Leadership is released a little bit later in 26. It's been a challenging book to write because just when you write it, AI happens, and then you got to think of all the different things that are happening in the world. But it's called Flawless Leadership, and the thesis of the book is to explore that fine margin between perfection and being flawless.
Mm.
And flawless is about investing 100% in the things you can control. Like that's how we define perfection, 100%. And then being intelligent enough to adapt to the things that you can't. So the hope in the book is to help leaders find comfort in really investing in their universe to be excellent,
Hmm.
and then take that excellence into the unknown.
Mm. Love it. Love it. How can people get in touch with you?
If you just type my name, Boucousis, I'm literally the only one out there apart from my dad. So you'll find me, Boucousis. Call Me Boo is my website, or Afterburner is my company, where a big part of shifting a mindset is help people need to believe that it can be shifted. And I think Afterburner is a very powerful platform.
Yeah.
It's kind of cool to have a couple of fighter pilots come in and explain how they think and they work to kind of break the ice to get people out of their kind of existing mindset.
Yeah, I love it. Boo, thank you so much, man. Really appreciate you being on, sharing your wisdom, sharing your thoughts. I I think there's so much that we can learn as coaches, regardless of the level we're looking at. But I really love this idea of, people who weigh in, buy in. And so letting them own it, asking good questions. It's just great stuff. So thanks so much for being on the Way of Champions.
Thanks, mate. Thanks for giving me that weigh-in buy-in. I like that. I never heard that before. That's a good one.
All right. Thanks again to Boo, and thank you to all of you for listening. Again, we mentioned Ryan Bernacchi in the middle and in the beginning of the podcast, and how much Jerry and I learned from him. And once again, Boo is sort of filled in this great knowledge of fighter pilots. But I just absolutely love this idea of these honest debriefs, and in these debriefs, asking questions to find out what people know, to learn about, check for understanding, as we might say in teaching, and really gain that information so we can teach or offer. But if they can solve it themselves, when they can co-create things, when they can weigh in, man, that's the best stuff. So, man, I love that. I love this idea of just his his idea of, I don't like the word feedback. I thought that was kind of cool. Like let's be curious, let's move forward. Um, the it, and maybe the last bit is, it's what's right, not who's right. What an important thing, right? That as a leader, as a coach, we can stand aside and just say, like let's just figure out what's right, and not who had the idea, who had the plan, or who had the play, and get our ego out of the way and really buy into these big decisions. So, yeah, all his stuff, links to books, links to Afterburner and callmeboo.com, all in the show notes as well, so you can connect with him. Okay. Thank you as we sign off here to all of you who are ordering books and getting ready for the upcoming season, The Champion Teammate. Get ready, brand new book coming out here very soon from Jerry and I on being a great team captain. So once that's out, that'll all be in the show notes as well. Thank you to Sprocket Sports. Thank you to Zone 14 Coaching for sponsoring the podcast. Thank you to all of our Patreon podcast champions as well. We truly, truly appreciate you. Remember, everyone, your influence is not neutral. So go out there, make a difference, be thoughtful, take what you learned here, layer on a little bit to your coaching this week, make a positive impact. See you again next week, everybody.